Freud versus Reich, Thanatos and the Masochist, Deverage Sandberg 2024. One of the classic beefs of early psychology took place between Sigmund Freud and Wilhelm Reich in the early 1930s. Influenced by his work with traumatized soldiers during World War I, Freud had published his influential paper Beyond the Pleasure Principle in 1920. Prior to this, Freud's model for understanding human behavior relied on a principle known as eros. Eros was the drive towards life. It animated our desire to be healthy, to stay safe, to have good relationships, and to have sex, to procreate. Eros was the basis for another early concept of Freud's, the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle was Freud's term for a child's relationship to the objects it desires. As a child, we are unable to delay the gratification of impulses for things that we desire without becoming upset. However, as we get older, most of us learn the value of offsetting gratification. In Freudian terminology, we have grown out of the pleasure principle and are now ruled by the reality principle. With World War I sweeping Europe, Freud began to recognize that the basis for the pleasure principle, eros, was insufficiently strong a concept to explain the level of sheer destruction going on around him. So he created the notion of Thanatos, a death drive that ran counter to eros in the human psyche. Behaviours governed by Thanatos included aggression and the urge to compulsively repeat acts. Both eros and Thanatos were now considered innate to human psychology. Each of us had a drive towards life and a drive towards death, forever competing within our own mind. Freud's model thus looked something like the upper part of the drawing below. The city of Vienna, home to Sigmund Freud, was the birthplace of psychology. Freud's school was vibrant and filled with many great humanistic thinkers of the day. As the 1920s progressed, so members of this school came to recognize Wilhelm Reich as a man who would one day take on Freud's mantle. His brilliance and his willingness to take a position marked him out as Freud's obvious successor. Reich's work with clients in the 1920s finally resulted in him formulating 4 character types: rigid, masochist, oral, and schizoid. The masochist is nowadays typically called the endurer. The schizoid is often known as the leaving type. In a 1932 paper on the masochist or endurer, Reich presents his notion that actually there is no death drive in the human psyche. Thanatos doesn't exist. Rather, the masochist or endurer character is responsible for the destruction previously attributed to Thanatos. How can this be? The endurer has had their natural outgoing spontaneity cut off as a reaction to harsh control from the parents when aged 2. Their nervous system perceived a threat and it shut them down. They cannot express anger. They cannot take a position for themselves. They are terrified of standing up to any perceived authority. They exist inside a black hole forged by their nervous system in reaction to their childhood situation. Most of us, to some degree or other, have some component of the endurer inside us. It simply holds us back. The only way that someone strong in the endurer can get pleasure is through trying to drag others into their own pit of despair and powerlessness. Endurers inside an organisation will not confront team leaders directly, no matter what the issue, but they will take pleasure in finding anything that can hold the project up or bring the project or its leader down. Our human need for pleasure is such that we will do this if no other way forward appears to exist. Reich's interpretation of Freud's death drive received nods of recognition and quiet admiration from other psychologists. It certainly seemed viable as a proposition. Freud did not oppose the paper's publication in the Journal of Psychology of which he was head, yet he did not directly comment on Thanatos and the endurer character either. And Reich's paper sadly came to mark a parting of the ways between Freud and Reich. Yet there remains a huge significance in Reich's proposition. Thanatos was conceived of as an innate aspect of human psychology that will forever seek to bring civilization down. Reich asserted that it was merely the result of parentally induced childhood trauma, something that we can fix. The Europe of a century ago was a society full of endurer or masochist types. The society of a century's time does not need to be so. Read more about Reich in this New York Times article linked. Thank you.